Hello and welcome to a Flosstube Extra with the Stitching Owl, where we are talking about fully finishing the 12 Days of Christmas mini stockings. We are using the Beez folk art pattern. This is an excellent quality pattern with good strong cardstock and colored charts within. There's also a lovely page after the 12th day of Christmas. She provides you with a page where you've got the outline of a stocking so that you can figure out how to do some of your finishing. And there is some directions on one way to do the fully finished stocking. So, of course, as always, step one is to complete your stitch. So that includes, if you're putting on beads, put the beads in. If you're using French knots, as I've done with this particular example, then you put your French knots in. And on my 16/32 count, I used Smyrna crosses instead of beads. You have many options to make it your own. And if you would like to see this stitched beautifully on black, you can consult the Flosstube videos of Dottie, the Stitching Scotty, and Annie, the Proper Stitcher, who are doing marvelously well on black. I'm just trying to give you other options. So step one, do your stitching. Now step two, you are going to consult this book and you're going to say that when you turn to that page after the 12th day of Christmas charts and you see your outline, if you are stitching on a 14 count Aida or a 28 count even weaver linen, you're going to copy it at 100%. If you're doing it on a 16 count Aida or 32 count linen or even weave, I recommend 90%. And then if you went all the way to an Aida 18 or 36 linen as I have, I copied mine at 85%. So I do encourage you to use a light box, or your window is right close by, to actually see whether the size you've made your stocking shape actually works for how much negative space you want around your stitch. So I copy this and then I put it on comic book board. Now, I buy my comic book board like this. I'll probably hold it right side up and try not to let all of it fall out. So you can see I get a lot of it all at one time. And I just order it from Amazon. It comes right to my door. And it's amazing how many, I can get a lot of stockings off of one sheet. So that comic book board is wonderful for being acid free and easy to get your hands on. So I copy my stocking. I do a loose, I cut around it, but I don't cut on the lines. I use a glue stick and glue stick it to comic book board. And then I actually also glue stick a second piece of comic book board, so it's really a strong template. And then I cut out on the line to make a good stocking shape. And then we hold it up to the window to see how it fits. Now let's see if it's just the time of day you can't really see very well here. But if I do this, you can see that I have a little bit of negative space over here, a little at the toe, and then up here, I'm not going to have very much. The bow actually goes almost side to side. How much space you want is your choice. You don't have to do it my way, just print on like 87% if you want a little bit more space. If you want even less, maybe 83%. Try it out and do your own thing. Now, I'm going to say to you, after you have made your template, trace around that template a couple more times on another piece of comic book board. And then use that first template for your stocking. And then continue to do this as you go forward. So cut out the next ones for the second day in the same way, trace around that, and then use the ones that you made at the end of the first day. You want to make sure that you're not constantly tracing around the same template, because it gets like just smaller by a hint each time. And so if you go around this like 20 to 24 times because you're using a double, and you might actually go around it even more if you're using this to make your backing, your 12th day stocking could be even smaller than you started, and then you can be disappointed. So try to make sure that you're staying true to your original size, and even go so far as after 3 or 4 days to print off another one at the 85% that I'm doing, so that you know for sure you're going from the original size. So that was step 3. And for step 4, what you're going to do is you're going to take this and you're going to put this on the back. Okay, so you can't see any of the stitching now. It's there. And you're going to cut about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch all the way around this shape. If you need to, you can certainly use friction pens to draw around, using a ruler to sort of do a bit of measuring. It doesn't have to be like super exact, but we do want to have enough space to work with the what we're going to do in future steps. So step 3, be brave. You need to actually cut out this shape onto to make it into a stocking shape that's a bit too big. Step 5. Okay, so we are back and we have cut out the stocking. Now, one of the things you'll notice this time is that because we are going to be doing this with sewing, which is lacing, I have zigzagged around my stocking. You can still use a paintbrush and something like this. This is what I'm meaning by a fray checker. This is called Fray Fix. There's one that's called Fray Check. Or, of course, clear nail polish. You can certainly do that. I just personally find that when I'm lacing, I like the zigzagging. But every person gets to do it their own way. So do take a moment and make sure that you have the edges, so you can see that right here there's the occasional piece of the thread from the weave that is sticking out, and so I'm just going to trim that off to make this nice and neat. You're right that it won't really show because it'll be behind, but we're going to do it anyway. Okay, so then we go on. So we need to decide what we're going to use for the back. And you can certainly use felt again. If so, match your felt to the color of your fabric. When you're lacing, you can also just use cotton, and that's what I'm going to use. And what I'm going to do is, so I have this. Now, what I did was I took this template. So we have this like this, right? When you are putting this on a piece of material that has a right and a wrong side, if it's a plain, the front and the back are identical, so this doesn't really matter. But the back of this, oh, you can see through. The back of it's actually white, and the front of it is actually white with silver on it. So what I did was this, I actually put on the back side to ensure that when I make my sandwich, the pretty sides are at the outside. If you place everything right side up and cut them out, when you flip it over, your toes will be going the wrong direction, and you'll be going, ugh, drat. we don't need to have any drat moments. So I have my backing fabric, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to practice my lacing and things like that on my backing and know that I've got the technique down before I start working on my front. So let's see what else I've got in here. Yes. Okay. That's your step. Make your backing, choose it, and make it into the correct shape. And then check yourself by putting your pieces next to each other, and do I have pretty sides out on both, so that you know that they are headed the right direction. Notice it doesn't truly matter if they totally match in size, because these are going to be laced tightly against the form. All right, off you go. Step 6. And here we are. We have this, and we now need to decide what we're going to use for our lacing. Upholstery thread is awesome. Now, I delightfully discovered that I had what I needed. This is a 10 weight crochet cotton. I find it really excellent for lacing in that it isn't quite as bulky as the heavier cotton that I have used at times, but it is strong. So that's what I'll be using, but anything that is really strong. And then I'm going to make a double of it. I've got a darning needle, like it's a pretty big needle here. And then my thread is longer than my arm, because you end up using a lot of thread. Now, in the long run, if it turns out you run out of thread, you knot off and you simply get another thread. It won't show on the right side, but I just like to start with a really long one so that I have less time with knotting, and I do put a good knot into the bottom of this. And then the first thing that we want to do is to take our right side of, I'm using the backing, but this step goes for both the back and the front if you're using cotton. If you're using felt for your back, you can skip this on your back and go straight to doing it on the front. We're going to do this, and we're going to do a running stitch around the curves. And you're going to do this on the correct, the pretty side. So here I go. This is where my curve starts, and this is the right side. And it's just a straight running stitch. Pull it through. And I'm going to continue to stitch all the way around at 1/8 to, hopefully not fully to the quarter, so that it's going to be at the edge of your stitching. So I've just done a whole bunch more of those stitches, and I'm going to pull, and you just make sure that you don't get any knots. That's the other reason I like crochet cotton, is it doesn't actually knot very well. So you can see I've got this running stitch around the edge. I need to keep going because I have to go all the way around the toe. So you'll notice that this is different this time. If you've watched my other videos, we were putting some snips into our curves, and we're not going to do that on this. So I'm just going to keep on going with my running, and I'm not going to cut my thread when I get to the straight side. Okay, so I now have the running thread all the way around the curves. I didn't worry too much. Oops. At the top, I am going to snip off the corners just a little bit to reduce the bulk. So notice that when you pull up, it causes this to gather. So I pull a bit from each end. It's actually handy to pull from this end, the short end, so that you have a little bit to knot with later on. Okay, so now what we need to do is to get our stocking form and put it in the toe. Okay, so you can see that it's starting to fit right into that. Now I'm just going to shift it a little bit, and I'm going to draw it up, and I'm going to draw this in. So you'll notice that on this side, this is starting to go smoother. It's not completely smooth, but it is going quite nicely. Now, at this point, we might stop and go, oh, my running stitch is a little bit too close. Actually, it's too far in and it's actually showing. We don't take this out. We leave it in. So if your running stitch is showing on this side, snip off the knot, pull it out, and just try it again. That's the beauty of doing these running stitches, is that they're super easy to actually play with. Okay, so now would be handy to have your clover clips. I'm gonna stop. Step 7. And here we are with our, I'm going to use the stocking backing to practice making my shape fit to the stocking. So what I'm going to do is I am going to start a running stitch on the right side, and I'm going to do it quite close to the edge. This is one of the reasons that we take the time to zigzag with the original stitch, because we need this to be, look how close to the side I'm doing this. It needs to be inside that 1/4 inch or it's going to show. We do not cut out this stitching. So I'm just doing long stitches. So I go, hang on, let's see if I can get this going right. So I'm going in, up, in, up, and I'm staying really close to the side. And it depends how many stitches you put on your needle, depends on how long your needle is. And what we need to do is to go all the way around the toe curve, along the bottom, and we need to go up the heel as well. So I'm just, this is going to be your gathering thread to get your piece of material to wrap around your comic book board. We do wrap it around fairly firmly, and that is one of the reasons that I use a double layer of comic book board, because I don't want to suddenly have the form underneath buckle. Okay, I'm almost there. I've got to do a little bit more of the heel. And it's okay if you go a little bit past that curve. Actually, it's not okay, it's best to go a little bit past that curve. So this is what my stocking looks like. I've got a running stitch around that. And now, and again, I'm just going to remind you that was on the right side. So I'm going to pull on the short end and on the long end. I did not clip, but notice what happens. It draws up this bottom. So now we take this and we go, okay, I'm going to put this in here And we do a double check and say to ourselves, I've got to make sure the pretty side is going to be on the correct side. So, okay. So the nice thing with lacing is that you can fiddle around and reposition quite nicely. And I'm going to pull this up further. And you have to make sure that you leave enough at the top. So now, the next step is to grab our bag of clover clips and make sure that we actually have things nicely in place. So I'm going to clip. I seem to be all thumbs today. It's because I'm trying to do it backwards. So notice I didn't really have to do a lot with the bottom. It just shaped. When I get to the corner, I am going to fold the corner over and then wrap it like a Christmas present. And then I clip that spot as well. I always clip my corners. We may have to come back and sew them by hand to make them absolutely perfect, but a lot of times the cotton backing works quite well. Okay, so right now you can see that my top is working well. This spot right here, I can clover clip, and that ankle is looking good. What is a little bit trickier is instead of the convex, the concave is a little tricky, but you can play around with it and clover clip it as well. Now there are times that later on we end up choosing to put one or two snips into the side of the cotton to make this go a little bit smoother again. But for now, I don't like doing it until I can see the exact spot that it's going to be needed. So I'm just looking at this going, oh, can I shift this up a bit to get rid of a wrinkle? So again, even once you have done your lacing, if you don't like the effect, you take it out. It isn't actually very messy at all. Okay, so I'm having a feeling that this spot here will likely need a little clip, but we're not doing it yet. So what we want to do now is to take this end, and I'm going to come across to where I had my, and I'm just going to pull so that I've got it in place. And then I'm going to start lacing back and forth. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go behind the camera so that you can see my hands better. Okay. So here, I'm going to come over here, grab a bite, and every time okay, what has happened? Oh, I've got a knot. Oh, no, it isn't a knot, it was just a twist. And I'm going to pull. And then I'm going to come down. And I'm going to pull. I'm going around that shape. Now again, where you have contouring is where we end up often having to come back and do extra. Okay, so now I've got this, and strangely enough, I'm going to come up and pull that part of the heel so that it has some of the shaping coming up. I'm going to come back down and I'm going to come up to the very top. Now there isn't a real rule about what order. I'm just trying to make sure the bottom ends up pulled towards the top towards the bottom, this into here. And you can see that I'm starting to run short on, wow, that one wasn't really worth it. We need to come down here. So you can see that this is starting to shape, and I'm going to come over to here. And now I'm going to knot this off, and then I'm going to actually take off some of the clips to see how I'm doing. So to knot it, I'm going to say, I realize I could go a little bit further, but you want to have enough of this string left to do a knot. So I'm going around like this and trying not to get it caught on my clover clip. And now that I've gone over that several times, you can actually add a physical knot if you feel like you need to. And now I will trim that off. Okay, so now I want to get rid of those ones on the side. I'm going to leave the ones on the corner and say, how am I doing? Well, we can see that this spot needs to be pulled more, and indeed on this side, that part doesn't have any lacing yet. Our toe doesn't fully have lacing, but it's actually quite smooth because of the gathering that we did. So our main thing is to pull the top part tighter and to try and see whether we can relieve just a little bit of the buckle here. So I am going to thread my crochet cotton again. I don't know that I super need a really long one, but to be on the safe side, I'd rather waste a bit of cotton than have to do 3 or 4 different lengths of thread. And yes, I do need to put on my readers to do this stuff because I have had cataract surgery and my eyesight is perfect at a distance and not as perfect up close. I used to be able to do my stitching without glasses, and it was the other stuff I needed to do with glasses. So I've got this going again. And so I'm going to go back here again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here. I'm going to pull through, and then I'm going to put my needle by that knot, and it's like having a loop start. So now that's really firm. And I'm going to take that spot over here that seems to have a little bit of a pleat. Whoops, sorry. And I'm going to pull that tight. I'm going to come up here. And I'm going to pull that tight. It is possible to lace very strange shapes. Okay, and now one of the things that I want to do, so I'm going to come up, I'm going to get it even higher, close to the top. Now I'm going to release this one. I've got my thumb holding that in place. And I'm going to actually put my needle through the corner and the bottom part, and then pull tight, and actually that's a pretty good corner. And now I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm holding this corner with my thumb, and then I'm going to put my needle in, grab the underlayer, get rid of the twist, and okay, actually my corners at the top, just by using that thumb, I don't think I'm going to have to go in with regular thread. So this is actually looking pretty good. So I'm just going to go down to here, and then I'm going to come over to this spot here. So notice that this is the spot that I'm trying to get just a fraction smoother. It might be that it's really hard to get that to be totally smooth. I've got a cardinal on my window ledge looking right in at me. But I put that pretty close to the edge, and then I pulled it tight. And that actually helped quite a bit. So I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to do that again. I'm going right around this concave spot, pulling it in. And then at this point, while there's a little bit of texturing going on, I can honestly say that when I put on my edging to sew my front to the back, that is going to disappear. So I'm happy with that. If you're not happy, simply cut your threads and try it again. So again, I'm going to just do a couple in a circle, pull it tight, and snip. So there I've got my back ready to go. So that means I need to do it again, but with the front. So off you go. You need to do that step. Step 8. Before we start with our lacing, I'm just going to advise you to figure out whether you want to have any batting behind your stocking. I like a little bit of poof instead of a completely flat, so I'm going to cut out a couple of layers, and I'm going to use this as a template, and I'll make one this size minus like a 1/16 of an inch, and then a second one a little bit smaller than that as well. The smallest one will be what I will put next to the cardboard. So prepare your batting. If you would like to have batting, yes, you can use felt on this layer as well. So you have just seen some stills of how I was working with my stitched top. I was layering, and then the next thing I do just before I pull the gathering is that I make sure that I've got the top clipped where I want it to be before I do all of the pulling. So I want to make sure that this doesn't end up over the back. So that's going to be fine. I'll have some space at the bottom. Okay. So it's a little trickier when you're doing the actual stitch because you've got to center your actual work there. And now we put the glasses back on, and I'm just going to pull up. You can see I just pulled that much and my heel was fine. Now I'm going to pull on the other cord, and hopefully you noticed how close to the edge I put my running stitch. Now it happens that I caught that in my, okay. So now I do want to make sure before I totally commit that this spot right here, when I really draw it up, is not going to pull all of this stitching out of whack. So I'm just going to pull over the heel a little bit, because that will allow me a little bit more space with the tail of my partridge. Now sometimes I have to actually let go of this stuff up here. So I'm looking at this and going, and is this going to be too high? I think I'm going to say I'm doing okay. I'm not a professional finisher like Vonna. Of course, I'm referring to Vonna Pfeiffer. She would have had this done a lickety-split. So I'm pulling that, making sure, so you can actually ease your material around while you're doing this. Put that there. And then just like before, everything else seems to just be hugged by my gathering. Okay, so now we start trying to do that same gathering, and I'm not going to film the whole thing, but I did want to show you how much care you needed to take with the actual getting of your stitch centered. So give it a try, and don't be afraid to take it out and try again. None of us are perfect. Step 9. Okay, so let's have a peek at what I've got now. This is the way mine looks, and look at how smooth this has gone. So what is the trick? The trick is, if we look at the back, and yeah, I show my back happily. So where is it? I put one snip. I didn't go all the way to this edge, but I put one snip, and that made that lie down. The other thing that I just want to bring to your attention before we actually finish with the lacing section is when you look at the top corners, this one looks awesome. This one looks kind of bumpy. So let's turn it around. What's the difference? I had to find my, so the difference is that I took regular Aurifil thread, and really it doesn't have to be Aurifil. I just tend to be somebody that only wants to use 100% cotton when I'm doing this stuff. Yeah, I know. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to sneak behind so that you can see my hands. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to come up under that piece of my lacing, and then I'm going to do that bit again where I come through and I grab that. My main reason for doing that is it ensures that when I've got a woven fabric that I don't just end up pulling that knot all the way through. So now what I'm going to do, let's see if I can find my camera. I'm going to take a little bit from this side and a little bit from that side, and then I'm going to pull it together. And I'm going to work this like that all the way to the corner to smooth out that corner. Now, before I go farther, I'm just going to trim off that little end of the thread. Okay, let's see if I can. So I'm still going in. It's amazing how close to the corner I'm going to get. Now, it's important when you're doing this stitching, this thread needs to match your back, because sometimes these show just a hint, and if it's a different color, you see it. No, there's my puppy. Hang on, I didn't quite get the other side. Okay, so now I've closed that up, and look, I've got a smooth corner. Okay, so here's the thing. A lot of people are going to look at me and go, geez, that was a lot of work. Lacing takes practice, and every time you try a new shape, you have to figure out the tricks to actually having that shape work. By the time I've done 12 of these, I will be really lickety-split, and so will you. I am strange. I happen to love lacing. This is something that I enjoy doing. I prefer to do this to do using glue because I know I can undo it anytime I don't like what's going on. Whereas with glue, you end up with residue. So this doesn't have to be the way you choose, but I thought I would show you how I end up lacing. And all I have to do now is to feed. What I do is I feed this back and up here a bit, and then I knot it up here so that the tail of the thread is going into this part and can't stick out of my final finish. So there you go. Now I've got my front laced and my back laced. And because they are looking opposite, I can actually fit these together, and all my pretty sides are looking out. So there we go for this step. Step 10. And on to the next step. I lost my light yesterday as a storm started to come in, so I stopped and am picking this up on the next day. When last we were together, we had completed our back and our front, and we are now ready to choose a hanger and make a loop that is long enough that a chunk of it can be on the inside. Now, you can use anything that you want. You can make a beaded hanger, you can use a ribbon, you can braid some pieces of floss together, really whatever you want. Today I am going to be using rickrack for my hangers. I have 2 of these packages, so I believe that's going to be enough to get all 12 of these down. So what I'm doing is I've started this, I haven't finished it. I'm going to put the hanger on the corner that is diagonal to the toe, because I find that it looks funny if it hangs this way. I want it to hang this way. The illusion that you've got something like an orange or an apple in the toe of your stocking. I know that's what my mother always did for the toe of the stocking to make it look nice and full. So I have cut this so that there's almost an inch there. This looks like it's huge on the back side, but on the front side, that's all you see, and that's enough for us to put a tree branch through. And I'm not sure if the person I'm giving this set to will have a real tree or a delightfully artificial tree. So I want to make sure there's enough room for an actual branch in case they go for real. So one of the things that I have done is I've got out the clear nail polish. I just get this at the dollar store. It's not an expensive brand at all. The first place I put it is I dabbed some nail polish on that spot that the last time we were together, we put a little clip here to make it so that this spot of the front laid flat. So I want to make sure that that is not going to fray further and get to the edge of my stocking. The other place that I used my clear nail polish is on the end of my rickrack, because again, it's woven, and sometimes as you are stitching, you end up with a situation that you're seeing things unravel a bit. I'm not comfortable with the unraveling. Even if it's going to be on the inside, you don't want it to unravel back too far. So I did that and I let it dry before I came to see you. Now I put on my glasses. There we go. So when I stitch this on the back, I have already stitched up this side. I'm going to stitch both sides of this down so that it is really secure. One of the most challenging issues arises when you have a hanger and then 2 or 3 years down the road, the hanger comes out. You've got a completed stocking, you've got a bit of a hole, and you're struggling to get it back into place. So my plan is to not have that happen. And again, so ask me how I know, because I gave my mother something with a beaded hanger, and a month later she went to do dusting and stuff, and she knocked it, and she didn't lose the beads, but it was a string, not a hanger. So I am going to aim to go through both layers. Now, I did a little bit before I started to sew this to the stocking. I actually sewed the 2 layers of this together so that if for some reason I don't quite stitch through both layers, no matter what, both layers are going to stay safe. And now this is when I move to have you see my hands. So I am going to go into the material that I have done my stitching on, and I'm going to come up the rickrack and pull tight. Now, neatness does not count. This is going to be hidden. You don't even have to match your thread to your rickrack. So you're going to just whip stitch this down by going along. I'm going to go along at least 3/4 of an inch and make sure that I am tacking this in place for it never to come free again. And I'm going to make sure that I knot it thoroughly and in such a way, so I'm at the edge of my stitch. So I'm putting in 3 times round. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to knot this, and then I'm going to draw it back to be caught here, and then I'm going to clip it so that the end of the thread is here where it can't slip out on the edge. So now I need to sit down to actually make my knot. I find it hard to actually do it from behind the camera. Now I'm making a really solid knot, and then what I said I was going to do is I'm going to go under and slip it over so that it's in the center, and then, yes, you guessed it, I'm going to knot it one more time. Is this a little bit of overkill? Some people will say it is, and that's fine. I would rather do this a little bit more than necessary than to have something go wrong. So you can see I've got that knotted right there, and I clip. So now on the front, I've got it like that. And I can hold it, that's your sure test, put your finger through and make sure that it can actually dangle from your finger. Okay, off you go to do that step. Step 11. Now the next step is one that I'm not going to do myself, but you might choose to. You might be wanting all the way around the edge for there to be something like this poking out. Now is the time to actually figure it out, and I put a running thread into place right here so that it goes around. Now my tip for the moment is when you get to something that is a curve, you can see, now this is a metallic so it bends even less effectively than other stuff, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, with the metallic, I'm going to make a stitch like this so that it goes around the corner. Ooh, I've got squirrels in my bird feeder. No, my fountain, they are thirsty because it's a hot one today. Oh, now he's checking to see if I'm going to put out any more food. So I'm going to make that. Now, if it is not as stiff as this, you can put in a basting thread like we did to the stitch and just draw it up so that it becomes rounded to go around those corners. But you can see that you do actually have to sort of put it on your stitch and make a plan for how that's going to be, where those gatherings are needed or where that overlap stitch is needed, and then tack it down. Now what some people do is they have two pieces of thread going, they start it up here, and when you start it at the top, my recommendation is to fold it over and make it so that that fold is going to be between. You don't want to have a raw edge at the top of your stocking, and again, I would actually stop it from unraveling with that little dab of nail polish. So if you're planning to put lace, mini pom-poms could look really cute around this. I really would love to be able to do that. I thought red would look beautiful. I do not have enough yardage here to do more than 2 stockings. And so as such, because I wanted to be able to do this demonstration, I'm just not going to put them on. Come back for the next step to figure out what I am going to do. Step 12. And now we are going to sew the front to the back. If you got this far and are doing super well and going, oh, I don't want to do more sewing, yep, you can glue it. I just find that the edges don't always stay as tight and neat as I want them to, so I do use the blanket stitch. Now, what can you blanket stitch the side with? Now, on many of the ornaments that you have seen me do in the past, I have used pearl cotton. So this is DMC pearl cotton. It is a 5 weight and it comes in different colors. So this is 712 and is just slightly off white. It's that cream colored. Like, you can get them in different colors. This is a beautiful pink color. So this is really good for blanket stitch. When you are dealing with cotton that is crochet cotton, the lower the number, the thicker the thread. So if you find some of Grandma's crochet cotton and it's a number 30, that is really, really tiny and it's like regular, almost regular sewing thread. This that I did my lacing with is a 10. This is a 5. I've decided for today that I'm going to use my 10 because this feels that for this dainty of a project, like that's going to be a little bit too thick. Now you notice that I got out some clover clips, but I'm actually going to take them off because we need to do something else first. So I am going to show you a picture soon where I show you how you decide how long your string should be. And you're like, well, how long is that? For every project that I blanket stitch, I do a double strand, not the end, so there's no way I can lose my needle. And then I loosely put it around the shape 2 times because I find then that I don't tend to run out of the thread that I am blanket stitching with and can do it the entire ornament in one. It is possible that if you run out of thread to start another one, it's just a little bit hard when you've got this so tightly to the back to try and end a knot neatly, get the next one in. Can it be done? Yes. I have not broadcast when I've had to do that and misjudged, but I prefer to only use one string. So you're going to go and get this and just pause this video for a moment and you're going to figure it out how long you need for the size of your stitch. Then you pick up your front. I personally prefer to start and end my blanket stitch at the bottom of my ornament so that if somebody's walking by the Christmas tree, they are probably not walking by it standing on their head and looking at the very bottom in case there is a moment where you can actually tell that's where you started and stopped. When you start up here and stop up here, it can be actually a little bit obvious what you've been doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this spot on the bottom and I'm going to put that in, and you can see that I'm having it come up right at the edge. I have done a double knot at the other end and I'm going to pull this through and have it go under here, so it is now under the lip of the stitch, but that knot is big enough that there's no way it can come through. Now here's the thing, if you had a particularly loose piece of linen or you went through in your Aida at one of the holes where you would normally stitch through, it could pull through. So you have to find a way. On Aida, just don't go through one of those holes, and on a loose linen you might have to take a couple of tacking stitches on the back to make sure that it's not going to come loose. So I now have this like this. Now is actually when I put my back on my front. Now I use a minimum of clover clips because I do find, and I only leave them on for a little bit of time, because you can actually end up indenting your piece. So I wouldn't walk away halfway through this with clover clips on. Choose when to do this and try to aim to do the blanket stitch all the way around in one go. And if life happens, put it someplace carefully, and I would take off the clover clips, leave them close by so that you can put them on again. Once you get the stitching started, I find that this doesn't actually end up moving all that much because there's lots of texture on the back of both of these for it to grip onto each other. So now, what do we do for the blanket stitch? So on go my glasses. And out of range, and I'm just going to move the chair so that I can lean on it. Okay, so here is my stitch. So I'm going to come over, and one of the best things you can do is to be consistent about how big your stitches are. What some people do is they put 2 pieces of ink on their finger so that they know this is where the last stitch is and this is where I'm going to go down. Now, I'm going to grab a bit of the front. I'm going to grab a bit of the back. Now notice, I'm not grabbing the cardboard, I'm just grabbing the edge. Now I'm going to pull it through, and notice because of how long this thread is, it can get caught on your clover clips and all sorts of things. So I'm very gently pulling this through. And the hardest thing is getting this started. There we go. And notice that I've got my finger here. So before I pull this taut, I'm going to put this needle through here so that when it goes tight, I've got a stitch here that is holding that stitch in place. So let me do that again. I'm going to come over. I do it 1/4 of an inch, and again, because I'm a quilter, I know pretty much where that 1/4 inch is. So I go through the front, I go through the back, I pull, and this time you can see that my loop is here. My thread is already going to be caught, and I've now got 2 stitches. And yes, when I hold it like this, you can see the stitches. When you do it like this, you're just going to see what looks like a little bit of lace. So I'm going to do that a couple more times. It is not a problem to go around a corner with this because you just follow the contour of your stitch. Putting my finger through, keeping it as smooth as possible, and making sure that this stitch is surrounded by, so you can see how. Now, every so often I let my thread dangle so it doesn't become twisted. When I do this stitch and come through here, if I hold this to the back side, when I pull this through, your stitch is already in the right place to be pulled tight. Now notice how tight I can pull that and how closed this goes. Okay, it's time for you to try the blanket stitch. Now some people might want to actually try this on just 2 leftover pieces of felt before they actually do it on this to see how it feels and to work on becoming a little bit even with how long their stitches are. Like anything, this takes practice. But let's go have a try. I just wanted to stop in and do another hint. So I have all of this side. So you can see it's blanket stitch and it's got a nice even little swirl when I do that. And when I hold it like this, all you see is like a ribboning effect. But now the question is, what do you do when you get to the hanger? It is a little bit tricky to actually continue a full blanket stitch if I have used a wide rickrack. So I don't want to make, if it's a narrow one, I would just go right around it and do 1 stitch. But I actually want to secure my rickrack one more time. So I'm going through the back and coming up the front, but I'm trying not to have it show too much on the actual front. And I'm going to pull that through. And then I'm just going to go down through that and back to the back without making a full blanket stitch. So I've got one more anchor in my hanging loop, and I managed to get a little twist that I want to take out. There we go. So I have anchored it, but when you hold it like this, you cannot tell that when I do this, there is a tiny stitch right there. But when you're looking at this like this, it doesn't look like that. And so then all I'm going to do is on the other side of this, I'm going to start the blanket stitch again. So I'm going to go through the front, go over the end of that rickrack, go through the back, put my string around, and this will help to keep this tight. Now, you might be thinking, oh, I was going to leave my top open so I could fill it. You can choose to do that. That is totally your choice. On my next way of finishing, I will be making it to be a fillable stocking. For right now, this one, I'm just making a flat finish that is an ornament versus being a functional stocking. So I'm just going to finish putting that in, and you can see that I am back to my blanket stitch. So the trick is to go all around, and I will be back in a moment to show you how I end at when I reach the spot where I started. Step 13, yep, we're going on. And here we are. I've gone all the way around, and I'm just one stitch away from where I started. But notice, because I pulled taut every one of my stitches, the back to the front has no gapes. It's just a solid stitch. And by having, it ends up to be 4 layers of comic book board in here, 2 on the back, 2 on the front. It both looks delicate and sturdy at the same time. Okay, so here we go. We have our stitch like this. I'm going to come up and I'm going to go from the front around that first stitch to the back and make my final stitch so that it actually travels through the first stitch. And when you do that, so that's that moment right there, but for the most part, you can't tell, and certainly when you hold it like this, there's no hint. But now we've got this to contend with. So you need to actually say to yourself, okay, when I pull this, I have to pull it so that I don't go like this and allow, okay, if I let my stitch go the direction I was stitching, this will be loose. I need to actually make sure that when I put my final drawing thread in, that you're pulling it this way. So I'm pulling it firmly and I'm turning this over and I'm going in and I'm going to go along the back. You can see that it's just like 1 to 2 stitches. And I pull it through and that anchors that stitch. Now, I have pulled up right behind my blanket stitch. So this is where I'm actually going to put a knot, and it's going to be hidden when you're hanging this on your tree by the blanket stitch. So I'm putting a knot, let me see if I can do this, right here against that stitch. But no, I'm not going to trim this thread at that point. I am now going to go down very close to it, and then I'm going to actually take this needle all the way to the side. So it's got all of that of a tail underneath. And then sometimes we end up with the situation where we've got a little bit of a tangle there, so I'm just trying to make sure that I don't end up with an extra knot. Okay, we almost dropped it. So this is one of those moments when you say, this never happens in real life, only when you've got the video going. Okay, so I've undone the knot that ended up there, and I'm just going to pull until that goes in there. So now it is flush with the back, and it's safe now. Be careful not to trim your original stitching line, but I trimmed it off there. So you can't actually see, so you can somewhat, like you have to really look to find the knot there, and you can't see where I trimmed it off there. Yes, okay. You did it. And step 14, we've reached the end and you can enjoy your ornament. So I hope that this has been valuable to you and that you have learned some techniques that you can transfer to other shapes. The 12 Days of Christmas Stockings are a wonderful addition to your Christmas tree, or a wonderful gift for your closest friends that can appreciate your level of commitment to making these stockings for them. Thank you for joining me today. I look forward to meeting you again sometime soon.